he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper, wouldn't you like to be a pepper too?
I'm Janet Anderson.
And I'm Tammy Vitale.
We're professors at Utah State University in nutrition and food sciences. Our mission is to get you hooked on peppers. This is a great time of year to be talking about peppers because they're in season. And this is the best time to try a new vegetable because they're at their peak of perfection and they have a lot of flavor. Actually, peppers, we call them a vegetable, but in reality, they're a fruit. They're in the fruit family. They have a lovely texture, smooth skin, waxy skin, and then they're very crunchy on the inside. All peppers, whether they're hot or mild or sweet, are part of the capsicum family. They range in size from a fingernail size, little tiny peppers, all the way up to very large ones, which can range up to a foot long. They also range in color, as you can see, from yellow, green, orange, red. Some of them are actually even purple and then start turning almost a brown color. Now, peppers are categorized into two groups. We have our sweet peppers, which bell pepper, the common round bell pepper, is the one that you're probably most familiar with. Many people find it to be a little strong and bitter flavored, but if that's the case for you, you may consider just trying them cooked because that helps with that problem. The other thing that I would tell you is these peppers are actually not ripe. This is a ripe bell pepper and this is an unripe bell pepper, which may be why it tastes a little bit bitter to some of you. We also have our hot peppers, and the hot peppers are also called chilies. They range in flavor from being very sweet all the way to a very fiery hot. What it is in peppers that makes them hot is an essential oil that's called capsaicin. It's such a strong chemical that it can actually even be used as a topical agent. This has been approved by FDA as a topical pain reliever because the capsaicin is such a strong chemical. Now, this capsaicin in our body has some interesting responses. What it causes our body to do is feel pain. We have pain receptors in our mouth, our nose, and our throat. And when those pain receptors are stimulated, it sends a message to the brain through the nerves, and the brain will then release endorphins. Some of you may be familiar with that. Endorphins are actually powerful chemicals in our body that are natural pain relievers, but they also give us a sense of euphoria. Sometimes people will claim that they are addicted to these hot peppers and they like very hot and spicy food. It is felt by some that this may actually be an addiction because of the release of the endorphins when we eat them. They also can have some interesting physiological responses for some people. Some people sweat under their eyes, some people their head itches, their face turns red, but people that love hot food love it and may possibly be what we call chili heads. Now, the heat, in terms of looking at heat, when you're looking at peppers and trying to decide what you're going to do, the hot peppers, the smaller peppers, tend to be hotter than the large peppers. And then also, the green peppers that are unripe are a little more mild than the hot peppers as we move into the hot peppers. Now, when you decide you're going to taste chilies, which I do recommend at least trying them, you want to take a little tiny taste because you're not sure what the heat value is going to be. We measure the relative heatness of chilies by using what we call the Scoville table. And it's a table that looks at the relative heat, and it ranges from 0 to 500,000 Scoville units. Now, for our purposes, we're going to categorize the peppers into just 4 categories. Now, let me share with you what those 4 categories are. We have the mild peppers, which include bell pepper, the banana pepper, and paprika peppers. The mild to medium peppers include the poblano, Anaheim, New Mexico, Ancho, and California. Then we have hot peppers, some of you may be familiar with. jalapeno, the chipotle, and the serranos. And then we have the very, very hot peppers. Well, the category is very hot, but I find them to be very, very hot. And these are the habaneros, the cayennes, and the Thai peppers. So be careful when you're tasting them. You just want to get a little bit to make sure that it's not too hot for you. And then you need to make sure you don't taste the seeds or the membranes, because that's the hottest part of the chili. If you do by chance eat food that is extremely hot and you need to cut that heat, some people think that, well, their instinct is going to be to grab the closest beverage. Drink water. Some people say beer cuts the heat. In reality, it's going to be the dairy products. If you have some sour cream, some yogurt, or some milk. Or another option might be to bite down on a piece of lime. That appears to help some people in cutting the heat. Now that you know a little more about which types of peppers you might like to try, let's talk a little bit about what to look for in the store when you go to pick out these peppers or chilies. Make sure that you choose the peppers that are firm and have no signs of wilting, and that they're shiny and don't have any signs of decay, because if you choose fresh ones, then they'll keep pretty well in the fridge for about a week in a plastic bag. So let's talk about how to cut this pepper up. First of all, make sure that you have a sharp knife. The sharp knives are actually much safer. And so first of all, you just cut very closely around that core, and notice that when you pull that out, most of the seeds come out with the core. And then you can just kind of shake the rest of the seeds out, cut it in half, and then carefully trim off those membranes inside. Now, as Janet mentioned, the peppers and seeds inside of the hot chilies are the very hottest part, so be careful with those. So once you get those cut off, it's best if you can just give it a little push to smash it down a little bit if it's a big, real firm pepper, and then just start to make sure you have a sharp knife first of all. Just make some cuts, and always make sure that you're keeping your fingers tucked well away from the knife for safety. And if you keep the skin side down, because the skins are a little bit tough, that also helps the knife from sliding off the skin. And then just cut the other way if you want to chop them. All right. Another thing that I wanted to point out is when you're cutting out really hot, spicy chilies, you can wear plastic gloves, but also make sure to wash your hands, whether or not you have gloves on or not, and don't touch your eyes or your nose, or put your contacts in, because that heat will be burning for quite some time after that. Also, wash off your knife if you're using hot chilies. Wash up your cutting boards. Otherwise, you'll get that heat in other foods or where you least expect it later on. Another way that you can buy chilies is in dried form. And make sure when you choose them, they're still a little bit pliable, not totally brittle. That just means they're a little bit fresher. And they come in a lot of different varieties as far as flavors when they're dried. This is a New Mexico chili. It's quite relatively mild. But then we've got these dried chipotles. They're smaller. They're actually smoked jalapenos, so they add a really nice flavor to pots of beans or anything like that, give a real smoky flavor. And this is a Pasilla de Oaxaca. They're just grown in Oaxaca, Mexico. And I would be really careful with the heat on these. Just pop those out, open, and put the seeds and the stems out before you add those to any recipes. You can also use dried chilies if you hydrate them in boiling water for about 20 minutes, and then when they're soft and pliable, you can chop them up or puree them into other recipes. That's in case you don't have any fresh chilies available. Another way that you can buy peppers is the crushed red peppers, and these are a good way to add just a little bit of heat to a recipe. And what I like to do is heat up some oil in a skillet. If I'm going to saute vegetables or onions or some other kind of ingredients, and just add a very small sprinkling, start with that much. And then the warming oil will disperse the heat real evenly through the dish. You can also buy peppers in the pickled variety. These are called pepperoncinos. You've probably all had those on sandwiches, but you can buy mild. These are a mild variety. You can also buy real spicy ones too, but they work well in potato salad or recipes like that too. You can also get a lot of varieties of canned chilies. These are whole green chilies. These are roasted red peppers, so these are a real mild variety. Chopped green chilies. These are chipotle chilies that are very spicy, and they come in an adobo sauce, so
go sparingly with those two because they're pretty hot, and also just more varieties of chopped and whole green.
We're going to give you some great ideas on some delicious ways to use peppers. We're going to start by looking at some ways to cook peppers, and then we'll talk about some ways to use raw peppers. We're always going to follow our cooking principle, which is cook once and eat 3 or 4 times, because we all know how busy we are. We're going to start by making a basic recipe called simple sauteed peppers and onions. All you do is you heat your oil a little bit, and then you can add just a few little pepper flakes so that the heat is diffused a little bit in the oil like Tammy talked about. You can let that heat for just a few minutes, and then we're going to go ahead and saute some peppers. I like to use some red pepper strips. I like to use some green pepper strips, if I can get to them. And we're going to just simply add some cut up onions. Now we're going to go ahead and let this saute for a little while. It's probably going to take about 10 minutes for this to cook down, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to use this simple recipe. One of the ways that I finish off the sauteed peppers and onions is simply using salt and pepper. You can add other seasonings at this point, but I tend to like to season the other items that I add them to. But just a little bit of salt and pepper makes a nice finish for these. Now I like to make a very large batch of sauteed peppers and onions because I use them for a variety of things. If you are making a large batch, you have to be careful and store them properly. You want to get them in the refrigerator, any leftovers that you're going to have, and store them in an airtight container quickly after you cook them if you're not going to use them right away. One of my favorite uses of these sauteed peppers and onions is to make fajitas for dinner. And you've already begun the process. You've got the vegetables cooked. All you do is put your pan back on the hot spot, on the hot burner, and then you're going to add a little bit more oil. And then you're going to add your chicken. And I've just taken chicken breasts, cut them up, and I'm going to add that to the oil. Let me get my heat going. We add that back to the hot pan, stir your oil around, add your chicken to that. With chicken, you always have to be careful how you handle it. Make sure you wash your hands after you've handled raw chicken and any surfaces that have touched the raw chicken. So we're just going to go ahead and cook that up, and then I'll show you how to season it. I like to finish off my fajitas by using other members of the capsicum family. And there's a variety of things you can do. I would recommend season lightly to begin with until you become familiar with these different kinds of peppers and what flavor they impart and how much heat they impart. I like to use a little bit of chili powder, so I sprinkle that lightly. Another pepper I like to use, or member of the capsicum family, is paprika. That adds a nice color as well. And then I go lightly on the cayenne pepper because it will add a fair amount of heat. Now we added a little bit of the red pepper flakes when we started the peppers, when we sauteed the peppers and onions. So I'm not going to add any of that here, but that's another way to add heat. So you can just stir these around a little bit. If you want to add a little bit of liquid to it, you can go ahead and cook it for a little bit longer. I like to put it back on the heat until that flavor is imparted in my chicken. The way that you put this meal together very quickly then is to just take your plate with your tortilla on it to make your fajita. I like to add some of the seasoned chicken breasts to that tortilla. And then you can add some of your sauteed peppers and onions. You can roll that, and voila, you have dinner. I like to serve it with some sour cream. I like to put some green onions on it, and then some cheddar cheese. And that makes a very, very simple dinner that all began with the seasoned peppers and onions. I'll show you some other uses. One of my favorite uses of the sauteed peppers and onions is to make a quick side dish. What I like to do is begin by sauteing just a little bit of zucchini, and then I like to add some frozen corn to that, and then add some of my peppers and onions to that, if they want to come out of here. And then one of my favorite things to do to season that is to add a little bit of diced jalapeno. Now we prepared this carefully and removed the seeds, as Tammy talked about. So you just want to add a little bit for flavor. I like it for flavor more so than the heat. But putting this together makes a wonderful side dish. You can go ahead and saute that, and then you have a side dish to go with your fajitas using your peppers and onions, or a side dish to go with any other meal that you may want to serve. I also like to add my sauteed vegetables to my eggs in the morning. It makes a really nice breakfast burrito. So cook your eggs with the sauteed vegetables, and then you can easily add that to a burrito, to a tortilla if you're interested in making a breakfast burrito. You can add some cheddar cheese to that, sprinkle it with cheddar cheese, and then you can just roll that. Kind of made a mess there, but you can roll that up. And you can add some salsa to that, and you're finished with your breakfast burrito. A lot cheaper than you can buy downtown and a lot more flavorful. I like the sauteed peppers and onions in pasta as well. I just start by simply cooking a pound of pasta, rinsing it and chilling it, or if you're going to serve it hot, use it hot. But I like to just add some of my peppers and onions. I like to add a can of tomatoes, and I like the fire roasted diced tomatoes. Maybe not the whole can, you have to kind of look at it and see how much you like. If you have any leftover fajita chicken that we just made, you can add that to your dish. I like to add some Parmesan cheese, and this is all just based on your liking. You have to experiment a little bit. Every time mine turns out just a little bit different and it adds interest. Then I like to add a little bit of parsley to it if you have some. You don't have to do that, but I like to also season it a bit with salt and pepper, keeping in mind that we have seasoned the fajita meat already, but you can always add some additional members of the capsicum family with the cayenne or the red pepper flakes, or however you'd like to do that. This makes a lovely, quick pasta dish, another entree made from the peppers and onions. This also makes a good leftover that you can serve the next day as a cold pasta salad.
Janet showed you a lot of things you can do with cooked peppers. Now I just want to talk a little bit about some ideas for raw peppers. You can add them to any kind of salad, green salads, potato salads, pasta salads, and again, you can just choose the heat that you like. Mild to hot, whatever you prefer. You can even try to pack some in your lunch as an alternative to carrot sticks or baby carrots. That's always a nice change, just stick some in your lunch. I want to show you a couple of recipes now that you can make from raw peppers that are real fast, easy recipes. The first one is coleslaw, and this is a really big recipe, but don't let that scare you because it stays in the fridge very well for a couple of days. Actually, it just gets better. So first of all, you just chop up 1 head of cabbage, and then you squeeze the juice of 1 lime over it. And if you don't have one of these lemon and lime squeezers, you need one. Ask for one for Christmas because they work so well and they get all of the juice out of it. So squeeze both of those on the cabbage. Just mix that up pretty well so you distribute that flavor through the cabbage. And then the other ingredients are 1 pepper, and I just chopped up a mix of red and green pepper, and a bunch of cilantro, and about 1 to 2 jalapenos depending on how much heat you want in this recipe. And then some olive oil. And season that with salt and pepper. As easy as that, all you need to stir it up. And it really does just get better over the next day or two. It tends to absorb flavors and soften up a little bit, so you can serve it in an hour or two, or even the next day or the day after that. And a good way to garnish that is with, again, some members of the capsicum family, the fresh rings, colored rings, and a little bit of chili powder just for some color. The next recipe that I'd like to show you is hummus. And this is an excellent dip to eat with vegetables, especially peppers. And it's also used for a sandwich spread, and it's really easy to make. So first of all, you use some drained and canned garbanzo beans and some garlic and some spices, which include some cayenne pepper and some chili powder and salt and pepper, a little bit of tahini, which is a ground sesame seed paste. You can find that in the grocery store close to the peanut butter. And the juice of 1 lemon. And some parsley. And green onions. It's also got some olive oil. And then about 1/3 cup of water. And that's it. And all you need to do is just put that in a food processor or a blender until it's a smooth paste. Once it reaches a smooth consistency, it's ready to eat. And you can just serve it in a little bowl with pepper dippers. Of course, with a little bit of jalapeno garnish and some chili powder. And you have a great snack.
Well, Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, and we used them all.
Try them, you might get hooked.
I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? I'm a pepper, he's a pepper, she's a pepper, we're a pepper. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too?